Welcome to AXREM Insights, developing healthcare through medtech and innovation. Join Melanie Johnson and Sally Edgington as they talk with our industry leaders and experts.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Meet the Team. We are your co-hosts, Melanie Johnson.
And I'm Sally Edgington.
Today we have the pleasure to be speaking to Jeevan Gunaratnam. Jeevan is the Head of Government Affairs for Philips and has been the AXREM Chair for the last year. Let's get ready to delve a little deeper.
Hi, Jeevan, and welcome to AXREM Insights. I'm really pleased you're able to join us today, and we're looking forward to asking you a few questions and just allowing us to get to know you a little bit better.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeevan.
With our podcast theme being Meet the Team, I will hand over to you, Jeevan, to tell us a little bit about yourself and what's your story.
Okay, so thank you for that introduction, and thank you for pronouncing my name wonderfully well. So I'm Jeevan Gunaratnam. I am Head of Government Affairs for Philips, and I've been in this role for about just coming up to 5 years. But I've been in this industry for quite a time, and really I've worked in the space of radiotherapy and diagnostic imaging for my whole career. Straight out of university and ever since then. And I've done lots and lots of different things around that space, lots of different jobs, but always in the same sector. What can I say? I love it so much that I haven't really looked to go anywhere else. Do you want me to go into a little bit more detail about any of that?
Yeah, we'd love to hear more. And obviously, you let slip a little while ago about there was a little bit of a dance interest. If you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my love of technology and medicine started when I was about 10 years old. And what happened was my uncle, who was a radiographer, he worked in a cardiology department at Barts. And one day when I was 10, he came home with an old pacemaker that they didn't need anymore. And this was a piece of electronics covered in perspex, and I used it as a paperweight on my desk, and it stayed on my desk all the way through school, all the way up till A-levels. And I was thinking, wow, how fascinating, the idea of electronics or technology that goes inside the human body. And that was that kicked off a passion and of that health tech interest. And so what I decided to do was pursue a career in that space. I just didn't know whether I was going to be an engineer or a doctor and kind of come into it from technology or from medicine. But I chose an engineering path, and I went to university and I studied engineering. But whilst I was there, I actually also danced. I did a classical Indian dance called Bharatanatyam. And so I had a crisis of confidence while I was a student and decided to drop out of university, much to my mother's disappointment, and go off to become a professional dancer, which I did. I joined a troupe and I did that for a while. But you don't make a lot of money dancing. You probably make more money teaching dance than actually dancing. And so I came back to university, finished my degree, and then I was sponsored by Philips at the time. So when I graduated, I thought, well, there was a bit of a recession going on. So I thought, well, what do I want to do? And I kind of developed an interest in MRI. So I kind of got into MRI and started my career in the tech side, in the engineering side of MR. That was where I started, and then went through a career of technology, R&D, applications, and then moved over to the commercial side and got more involved with the kind of selling of products and services. But partway along, I decided to change from being a supplier to being a customer. And so I became a healthcare provider, and we built clinics in the private sector and did that all over the country. And so I was on the receiving end of the services of lots of our AXREM members, and it gave me a different perspective. And then finally, I also joined the NHS as a non-exec director, and I sat on the board of an acute trust in London for about almost 8 years. And that gave me a really good understanding of some of the challenges and the wonderful commitment and dedication of people who work in the NHS. So Yeah, that's a potted history of my career until about 5 years ago when I got an opportunity to come back and join the company I started my career with. And I always say to people, it's a bit like your first sweetheart. Philips was the first company that gave me a job, and I'm hoping I'll see out my career here as well.
Oh, thanks, Jeevan. That's really interesting. And when we're speaking to members, it's amazing how much talent there is with your dancing. Maybe one day I might be able to get one of my ideas off the ground of AXREM's Got Talent, and we can get you dancing again
I
for
doubt
us.
that very much.
But it's clear that your interest in our industry goes back a long way with your uncle and, when you were a child. But why are you passionate about what you do, and what are your drivers?
So I actually, when I first joined Philips as a student, it was actually a defense company. So it made lots of military equipment, and the medical bit was on the side. And the reason was there's a lot of R&D that goes into the defense industry, and often there's a spillover from that into lots of other areas, and healthcare was one of them. So radar led kind of the technology that went into radar ultimately led to the kind of some of the tech that went into radiotherapy. And it was difficult because when you're, I guess, a bit of a geek, as I was back then, you love the tech. You love the fact that everything's really kind of modern and new and the latest cutting edge technology. But what doesn't sit well is then sometimes thinking, well, what's the purpose of what I'm doing? And whilst defense is important, and I'm not somebody who wouldn't say it's not important to have defense technology, it sat better with me thinking that the stuff I did went towards helping people get better, improving people's lives, and not just the people who are sick, but also the families, because every patient that comes in to a hospital will have, a family around them, and they're equally affected by that healthcare journey. So that really prompted me to try and do something. And I know it's so cliched, Sally, but to make the world a better place, and to feel when you go home, even if you did a little bit, that little bit made somebody else's life a bit better. And that has been my motivation. It still is my motivation. And so I think it's the reason 30 plus years later that I still get up and go to work and have a smile on my face and feel that I'm making a difference.
And Jeevan, I absolutely get that, because even in my job, I feel that indirectly, as a whole, AXREM members make such a huge difference to people's lives. And that's what motivates me on a daily basis, that as industry, we're doing things right. And the focus is always around the patient and the quickest diagnosis and treatment and the best pathway. So absolutely get that. So I think, we've discussed before, there's been challenges in the NHS over the last few years. We know with funding, COVID obviously shone a light on our NHS, and even more so made everyone realise just how important it is. But thinking of industry, if you look ahead and horizon scan, what do you think are going to be the biggest challenges that you see for industry in the future?
So I think for me, I would split that into kind of two buckets, if you like. There's the stuff we know about and are consciously, actively doing something about. And then there are the things that are perhaps they're important, but they're maybe not talked about, or there's not as much of a focus on them yet, but they will have focus because they are important. The obvious one is workforce. It's the fact that we need more people. We're living longer. But despite living longer, we're spending more time in poor health. So we need more healthcare, and we need more advanced healthcare. So we rely on the kinds of products, the kinds of machines and systems that our AXREM members manufacture. And so there will be increasing demand for that. And those things cost money. So the challenge will be, we've got more demand, we've got an increasing kind of population as well, and we will have new diseases, new things that we need to deal with. And all of that, there's a huge kind of emphasis on technology being part of the solution. And there isn't a huge amount more money in the system. and there aren't enough people to run all of these machines and all of this product. So when you look at it, it's really difficult, because you think, well, actually, how do I square that circle? And one of the things that I think companies like Philips and other AXREM members can do is use technology to help transform the way people work, to help skill more people to be able to do a better job or a more effective job through support from technology. And I heard a bit of a worrying comment on the BBC News program the other day about AI, and a slightly casual phrase, the robots are going to come and take over, and it absolutely isn't like that. The whole purpose of this technology is to empower healthcare professionals to be able to do their best. And I think that that's going to be the biggest challenge, is how do we empower healthcare workers to do more effectively, and how do we do it within an environment where there isn't a huge amount of funding available. So they're then looking to more flexible ways of delivering it. So changing the operating model, or adjusting the operating model for healthcare, but also looking at the funding model for healthcare. And how do we do that while still keeping true to the principle that the NHS is at the heart of providing care that's free at the point, free at the point of care. And I think that is going to be a real challenge for us. The thing that for me isn't talked about as much is the issue around sustainability. AXREM really leads, I think, from the front in terms of talking about it. We heard recently, I think, that some of the political parties are rowing back from some of the commitments around sustainability, and that raises concerns around, is it too difficult? Is it too difficult to message for the population? But the truth is, globally, 4.4% of the CO2 footprint comes from healthcare. In the UK, it's actually higher. It's at 5.4%. In the United States, it's, I think, closer to almost 8%. Of their total CO2 footprint comes from healthcare. So healthcare has a massive impact on being able to impact and reduce that CO2 footprint. And so I think it's really important for us to also focus on sustainability. Now, that sustainability could be that our machines use less power, they can do more for less, that they're more recyclable, that you can upgrade them and keep them running for longer and you don't have to scrap them. Or it could be from a workforce point of view, we have technology that allows people to work remotely. And that means they don't have to travel as much, and they're more efficient with their time and their energy, and it actually makes it more attractive for them to work. So there are lots of things that we can do under the umbrella or label of sustainability that actually have a direct impact on how everything else works in healthcare. And so for me, my view is the priorities are not just what I think the NHS leadership talk about, which is workforce, demand, technology, but the other stuff, which is the big picture, digital connectivity, sustainability, and looking at different models, both funding and delivery of healthcare.
And two really great points there, Jeevan, especially around, I talk a lot, obviously, in my role around innovation and how, like you mentioned, AI, some of our members have AI products that create efficiencies for the workforce. And I see that as the quick fix, because the long-term fix of getting a bigger workforce, obviously is going to take many years, whereas your products and services, all these innovations are going to create all those small efficiencies, all add up and make a big difference to the NHS and the environment in which the clinicians are working in, and their jobs, being more bearable under very difficult circumstances where they're working long hours and trying to do the best for their patients. And on your point around sustainability, obviously we have a really active special focus group in AXREM, which I'm really proud of. And we're going to be writing, or we're in the process of writing, a sustainability manifesto. So I think that will be really good, because some of the points you've just raised will be in there, and it'll be setting out what those points are. And it's great that we're seen as the leaders within the kind of trade association world, which I, like I say, really proud of.
And for anybody listening to this, Sally didn't prompt me to say any of that.
No.
It is absolutely, it is absolutely something that I care passionately about. I'm a parent, and I'm thinking very much when I come to work about the state that we as a generation leave the planet in for that next generation. And so I think it's really, really important that we do that. And interestingly, there is a direct link between sustainability and healthcare in terms of, as global temperatures may rise, we will see a shift and perhaps explosion of disease in places that we haven't seen before. So, for example, I think malaria is spreading to Florida, for example. There are lots of things that are happening as a result of climate change. And so we will start to see, maybe the same diseases in new places, or even new diseases as a result of different climatic conditions. So it is really important, not only for the planet, but actually also for the load that will come to healthcare.
Yeah, thank you, Jeevan. That's really interesting. As you know, obviously, I'm fairly new to this sector. So what advice would you offer to someone starting out in the world of industry?
Yeah, so I'm going to split this into two. One is a kind of general if you're at the beginning of your career, and secondly, if you choose kind of our industry. Okay. The general advice I would give anybody is follow your heart, follow your passion. Okay. You can get to the, you can get to the top of anything. And when you're at the top of whatever it is you choose to do, actually the money, the status, the prestige, all the rest of it, the reputation, that all follows. So just be good at something. And my advice to anybody early in their career is, it's difficult to figure out what you're good at. So figure it out, try, work on yourself and figure out what you care about. And then what happens is that work, it doesn't look like work anymore. It actually looks like fun. So a lot of what I do and a lot of what I learn and read about and so on, I don't do it because it's work. I do it because I'm genuinely interested in it. And then you go into meetings and you happen to have a little bit of knowledge that's useful. And you think, well, how did I get that knowledge? It's actually because you got a passion. So I'd say to anybody, follow your passion, whatever it is you choose to do. And then my advice to anybody considering a career in health tech, med tech, is if you want money, this probably isn't necessarily the right sector to follow, because it's not as maybe high paying as tech, going to Silicon Valley and all the rest of it, data analytics and so on. That isn't why you do it. I think people choose our industry because they feel that they make a difference and they make lives better. And if that really makes you feel good about yourself, floats your boat, then this is an industry that will keep you employed for the rest of your career. The great thing about healthcare and technology is I cannot see it ever not needing more talent, more great people joining the industry for as long as I can work, and as long as the current generation who are just starting will work. There's plenty of work in this industry, and it will never run out. I don't believe that it will ever run out. So if it's something you love, you could be pretty confident you'll be hopefully gainfully employed for as long as you want to be. So I think it's a pretty cool thing to choose if that's what you want.
Do you know, that makes so much sense, because when we do see you in meetings or anywhere really, you are happy, you are passionate, and I see that. So no, that's great. Thank you.
And Jeevan, so turning your attention a bit now towards AXREM, I know you've been aware of AXREM and involved with AXREM for a long time. So what do you see as the benefits of being part of an industry voice like AXREM?
So I think this is so interesting at the moment. I think COVID has really changed, I think, our appreciation of the importance of the healthcare system, I think, as part of our national makeup, as part of our national identity. And I think if you go to almost every country in the world, they could probably say something very similar about their healthcare system. So sometimes when everything's going well and you're healthy, like the healthcare bit runs in the background and it just works and it happens. But when it doesn't work, when there is a pandemic and things, you suddenly realize just how important and critical your healthcare system is. And what we do is that there are all these players that, so there's lots of focus on the hospital, the doctors, the nurses, there's huge amounts of focus on them. What there isn't as much focus on is a number of, I'd say, key players who perhaps sit in the sidelines, but are really, really important in terms of making sure those clinicians can do their work properly. And, AXREM members are absolutely part of that. We were all heavily involved in the emergency response during the pandemic, and we will be involved in lots of future important areas too. We're heavily involved in AI and the introduction of AI into healthcare right now. So sometimes you can do that as an individual company, and some companies are big and some companies are small. And so the big companies often have, a lot of influence and contacts and connections. And the smaller companies sometimes have amazing ideas. So the UK, I think this is something that's really important. The UK is home to such amazing kind of innovation, like, at all scales. So small scale as medium and of course, the large scale businesses. And so having a trade association allows there to be a collective voice to make sure that those visionaries are heard. I'm an engineer, and I can tell you that sometimes engineers are very good at designing stuff. We're not very good at marketing. We're not necessarily very good at standing on a rooftop and shouting about how great our product is. We just know it's great. So sometimes you need a bit of help to make sure people hear you. And that's what AXREM can do. AXREM helps a lot of our members be seen and heard. And even for the big ones, even for the bigger companies, and I'd count us as Philips as just one of those, we've got quite a few, big enterprises. And even we need help because sometimes we compete, but we actually are competing in a world where we want to do things in partnership with the NHS and work to a kind of, dare I say it, a greater kind of drive or vision. And we need to do that in a way that's a collective kind of vision of where we think healthcare can be. And for that, we come together, even though we are competitors, and we're fiercely competitive, but we also are very proud of fighting for the rights, fighting to do the right thing. And in a very noisy environment, it's really important to have a strong voice that gets heard. And I think that's the absolute value of AXREM, is to be able to say, we know because we have all these members, small, big, large, huge, international, so global and domestic. And this is what they're saying, and we represent those views, and we know we're confident about the views we represent. And that is a huge strength. And actually, good governance of our health system, so the ability of government to legislate, for example, on AI, or the ability of the NHS to be able to consider capital investment plans for the future, requires good voices talking to them, friends who can support them, but also say, this isn't going to work. If you try it, it's going to be a problem, because we all work in a global context. And I think that's where government and the NHS benefit from having a strong voice like AXREM.
And you say about the voice, Jeevan, our voice is getting stronger and bigger because we're now 60 strong, which I remember standing on the steps of Roverick House before Christmas with our big 50, and we're already now at 60. So we're growing, our voice is getting bigger, our presence is getting more. The more companies we get on board and the more engagement we have externally, I can really see that AXREM is elevating to levels that even I potentially didn't expect for us to get to when I first started 5 years ago. And members like yourself that are really committed to AXREM and to our cause is what makes AXREM such a great community. And I feel like we are like one big happy family. And I know you say, obviously, companies are highly competitive, but we have our competition law, guidance. But actually, I'm really impressed that when we get into a room and get all the players around the table, just how productive and positive the outcomes and actions are from those meetings. So thank you, personally from me for your commitment to AXREM.
Oh, thank you. No, it's a pleasure. And do you know, I think even for me, we have a day job, which is we work for individual companies, and then there's this kind of, I think my son would cringe now if I said, but it's a bit of a side hustle, isn't it? So we go and do the AXREM bit, and it's important, but it isn't our main job. And what happens, what helps is working with people who bring energy into the conversation. And that energy is infectious. So whether it's from my fellow AXREM members and having conversations and knowing we align on how we're trying to help the NHS, or bringing that energy, and I absolutely know it's appreciated by the NHS because of the conversations we have about how much they welcome our contribution. And sometimes I think it can be a bit challenging when you're inside the NHS, because that's your whole world. So having somebody come in from outside and align with you and say, actually, what you're doing is right, it gives them a lot of power, gives them a lot of validation and energy. So I do think, Sally, we get as much energy from each other, and we don't always agree on everything, as a collective, as an AXREM committee. We don't. We have lots of different views, and it's good to have that diversity of thought. And I don't know whether we're going to pick up on this in this podcast, but we've obviously extended to include, the next generation in terms of future leaders. And that diversity is not just in terms of people agreeing or disagreeing, but actually looking at the depth of people engaged in the industry at all levels, and using them to kind of set the agenda for the future.
Okay, right. So going on to my quirky question, so changing the context a little bit.
Okay.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
Oh, this is really difficult. I'd have loads. There are loads of superpowers I'd have. But there's one thing that matters to me more than anything else, and I think that is to be content and to be at peace. I think it's, I was watching, there was a speaker, Professor Michael West, who runs or used to run the NHS staff survey, and he once gave a lecture where he talked about happiness and about some of the qualities of happiness that he was able with his team to draw out from the NHS staff survey. And I think it was the ability to feel connected to people. That was one of them. There were 5 or 6, but being connected to people was one of them. The selflessness, doing things for other people, was definitely one of them. Being in good health was obviously one of them. So if I was going to choose a superpower, it would be very much around things that would allow me to make myself and others happy. And I think my superpower would be to be able to make everybody smile and be at peace with whatever they're having to carry in their lives, because we all carry loads. And I think that would do me.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Jeevan. So we've found out loads more about you today, and we've got your industry view on lots of different things. So thanks ever so much for being our guest today, and thank you to all of our listeners.
Okay, and join me and Sally next week when we'll be speaking to AXREM Vice Chair Hugh Shermer. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to hit subscribe, or feel free to share the podcast with friends.